Hey everyone, welcome to a new video, welcome to my channel. My name is Maika and today I have a video for you about some of my favorite literature courses that I took when I was at university, and then I sort of have a book per course that I would like to mention as like a representative of that course, the thing I had to read for that course that I ended up liking the most. If you didn't know, I studied English at university. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in English, plus I'm an English teacher. This doesn't really come out of nowhere, you could say. And there are definitely a couple of courses that I took when I was at uni that really brought me a lot. And a lot of those actually ended up being the courses that I took during my master's. I mean, during my bachelor's, I had these like larger, like overview kind of courses, and of those I did like those. I liked my early modern English course, and I liked my restoration course. The one I liked the best was the Victorian Lit course, and the Victorian period marks just the change of writing, and novel writing really became booming at the time. More people became literate, so it really meant a boom for a lot of literature. And literature in the Victorian era was very different from how we would consume it nowadays. So a lot of the Victorian era books were like these tomes of like 500 plus pages, and it was impossible to read them. Like, I was happy if we had a week where we could just read poetry because it was easier to get through. But the book that I focused mostly on during that class, and I wrote an essay about this as well, was Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. This is not necessarily one of my all-time favorite books, but I remember really digging sort of the, well, almost like feminism that's going on in this story. That was what my essay was actually about. It was about the female representation and how it lined up with sort of concepts of women and femininity at the time. So what was a Victorian woman like, and how is that represented in Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights? That was what my essay was about, and it was quite a successful essay, so I was very happy with that. I never went back to this since, and for the course, because I was doing 2 literature courses at the time, when I was following this course, it was just a bit much in terms of reading. So I taught myself how to speed read when I was at university, to just get the gist of a story, but to not have to read the whole thing. That's how I got through most of my books. So I did read the whole thing, as you can see, because I used to break the spines of my books. Especially because you want to take notes on it, etc., etc. And it was one that I enjoyed, but in terms of story, because I didn't read it very in depth, I still feel like I should go back to it. But of that entire course, I really just enjoyed this the most, and there's probably a reason why I still really like Victorian England, or like the Victorian time period as a period for books to be set in. I think it can all be brought down back to this literature course, and this book in particular. Like, I read a book last year by Daphne du Maurier called Jamaica Inn, and that's set in, I think, Cornwall, I'm not sure, but somewhere on the coast. It's also really dark and gloomy, and I also read that Daphne du Maurier was very much inspired by the moors and descriptions of that in Wuthering Heights, and I could definitely sort of see the link there. So even though I would not necessarily categorize this as a true like Gothic story, it definitely has Gothic elements to it, which is another reason why I probably enjoyed this so much. Let's stick to then the other course that I was following at the same time. Let's just go into semi-chronological order. At the same time as I was doing that Victorian era course, I was also enrolled in an American Gothic course. And for that course, we had to read this. There are a couple of books actually that stand out to me from that course, but this is probably the best one because I've actually reread it, I think even twice ever since graduating. This is Flannery O'Connor's Wise Blood. And this book is not for the faint of heart. This is weird, but I like weird. I like unreliable narrators. I like a bit of crazy. And this is not a Gothic story in the sense of like, ooh, there's going to be a vampire. No, this is set in the US southern states. I think it's Georgia, I'm not sure. And it focuses on a character called Hazel Motes. And Hazel Motes is a man who just came back from the Second World War and then needs to find his place back again in society. He goes back to where he came from and kind of moves to the bigger city. and there he sort of meets all these different characters. This is a book that really focuses on like religious fanaticism, on corruption, on people who are saying one thing but then aren't necessarily who they seem. And that's why this is a gothic story. It's not a gothic story in the sense of like Dracula or like, ooh, a castle and someone's gonna kill me. It's not that. It's definitely more of like a society kind of study almost, and he doesn't like what he finds. So yeah, this is a book that's, as I said, it's weird, it's a bit strange, and this is definitely not something that a lot of people will like. This is a bit of a Marmite book. One of the courses that I enjoyed most during my master's wasn't a class like traditional literature course, but one of the subjects that I had to take during my bachelor's was Old English. We had to do like English through the ages, and some of the courses focused really on the history of the English language. We also did Old English. And then during my master's degree, there was a course in Old English literature, but that really tried to explore the links between England and the Vikings. So it focused on Norse mythology, Norse saga, all of that. And this book was not on the reading list, but because I wanted to know more, I bought it because I love mythology, if you didn't know that about me yet. And this is John Lindo's Norse mythology. And I actually found out that this is also one of the main books that Neil Gaiman used to write his Norse mythology book, which I wasn't a huge fan of. But I think that this is sort of the be-all and end-all of Norse mythology, and that course really inspired me. I thought it was a very fun course. I think I still have some of those sagas sitting on my shelf as well, because we had to buy the Penguin version of it. It's all about battlefields and hey ho, we're gonna save the world kind of thing. It's very much that, and it was just great to really sort of take that historical perspective of a society that is also just run in a completely different way, and just really seeing how even at that time, and that's sort of where it came from. A lot of these stories, these sagas, even though they were first written down in Old Icelandic, they have English warriors in them, and vice versa, because Beowulf, in case you didn't know, that's probably one of the most famous English like works in Old English. Beowulf is written in English, but it is about someone from the south of Sweden, because that's where Beowulf lives. So it's a bit like that sort of crossover was very cool to explore and see that even at that time it was like that was already like a global economy going on. And then let me finish on the highest note possible. But I definitely discovered Sherlock Holmes through one of my literature courses. Sherlock Holmes? Yes, Sherlock Holmes. During my master's degree, I also took a course on London literature. So literature just about London, and it sort of started in like, I don't know, 17th century, and then it went to the modern day. So there was like a different thing going on every single time. And Sherlock Holmes, it doesn't get more London than this, even though Arthur Conan Doyle only visited London ever, and most of his information he got from like encyclopedias and libraries and directories and things like that. He didn't actually like live there for very long, I believe, if he even lived there at all. But yeah, so we had to read this for our course, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes and the Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes, and that made me fall in love with Sherlock Holmes. And I ended up going back to this as an audiobook, or maybe as an e-book, when I was traveling, and it was lovely. I can go back to these stories all the time. And again, there's a reason. Like, I think, again, you can see like the gothic stuff that I like, the dark gloominess, the weird is in here, mythology is in here, and detectives, because I love detective stories. So this pretty much links to everything that I like. And then last but not least, I also took a course in American regionalist literature. So what that course was about, that in the 19th century, as like America sort of came into their own, and after the Civil War, like people were really sort of like becoming Americans, you could say. And the course really focused on like authors who took their hometowns as like a setting, so the region they were from. And Willa Cather's The Song of the Lark was on that reading list, which at the time I didn't get around to reading, I have to be very honest. But I was so taken by the premise and the discussions that we had in class that I knew I wanted to read it. And this is not a fast read at all. It's quite a, it's not the longest book ever. It's over 400 pages, but like the typeset is super small. So this does take a while to read, and I think I read this when I was commuting to and from a full-time internship when I was about to graduate. And this was just so lovely, and this I think really embodies what that course was about as well, because this is pretty much about a girl who grows up on like in a frontier kind of town in Arizona, and sort of how she comes into her own because of living in that town. And I think that this is such a strong story to tell. It's a bit like a character study almost, because we follow the main character Thea from when she's a little girl to her becoming a famous opera singer in New York. I'm not giving anything away from the plot, because this entire novel is about how she gets there. That's what it's about. It's a slow burner, but the writing in this is beautiful, and that was what that course for me really was about. It had lots of like beautiful writing, and this sort of like, I don't really read a lot of like character studies, but if it's well done like this one, I really like it. So this was a little bit different again for me. I'm just trying to talk about books that I already read in the past and sort of like linking it to bits in my life, because I think that can be valuable as well. I don't only tend to read new books, and I don't tend to have the time to read as many books that I can just keep churning out content about new stuff. So that's why I also want to talk about stuff that I still love, but that, you know, we're talking about 10, 15 years ago that this was going on, maybe even longer by now. I think we're nearing the 20-year mark, actually, Micah. So yeah, that I was at college. So this is definitely old stuff, you could say. But hey, if you're looking for recommendations of something weird, something dark and gloomy, mythology, or if, you know, any of the other things, then I can definitely highly recommend these. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give a thumbs if you liked it. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more by me. I make 1 video a week on this channel, but 3 videos a week on my beauty channel. So make sure to check that out as well if you didn't already. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye.